until people came in the door. I never keep him in the loop. He's just fine with everything. So I just want to tell you how I met Judy.
I want to hear this.
This is my good friend Judy. This is an interesting story. So it was August 2022. We were at a bocce tournament.
World tournament.
Yeah, we were supposed to be playing bocce.
Tom was there.
Yeah. I walked in, and the very first person I met was Judy. I sat down in front of Judy, and 4 hours later, I got up. And what fascinated me about Judy is that she is a manners lady and has a heart for manners. And we were discussing this because our culture out there today, as we all know, is really lacking on a lot of, what we call good manners and just thoughtfulness and kindness. And I have 6 grandchildren, and it was always so interesting to me that no one else seemed to really do anything about it. And then I met Judy, and Judy was doing something about it. She wrote a book, and she had CDs, and she was talking about changing the young people so that they would be cognizant of good manners. So we spent 4 hours together talking. And then after that, I found out that she lived nearby, and so we've been good friends ever since. And now, Judy, you're going to introduce your.
This is my walking partner. If you're in our Friday morning group, put up your hand. Friday morning walking group. Great, you're all welcome to join us 8 o'clock down by the pier, right?
I've met so many people since I've met you. Okay,
so Edith, I'm so grateful for you and all of you that are here and taking your time to be here. And as I look around the room, I'm just so grateful for each of you. I know each of you in a different way. And just thank you for being part of my life, especially since Ned and I moved here to South Surrey. And we just love it down here. And so Edith, thank you for hosting this and honoring my daughter. Like all she wanted for Christmas from her daughter was my daughter's book, The Soul of Civility. So that really blessed me. Thank you, Edith. And they're being passed around. If you want to look at it, they'll be available after. For me, as a mom, how cool is it to be able to travel with my daughter to over, 25 cities, from Washington, D.C. to a reception at Parliament. She's spoken at about 20, maybe 15, 20 law schools, at the Federalist Societies across America. She'll be speaking at Trinity Western tomorrow, if any of you would like to go. How many of you went to Trinity, or you had kids that went to Trinity? Mm-hmm. See? There you go. Keep praying for our school. Anyway, so my heart is filled with gratitude, and I just wanted to share a little song that I sang for Zig Ziglar when he was at the Queen Elizabeth Theater, and an attitude of gratitude. How many of you remember Zig Ziglar?
Yes.
So this is what I do. I go to the schools, and cities bring me in teaching kindness and character. And just before I sing this little 30-second song for you, I just want to share one thing. A gentleman named Jeff is a city councilor in Carmel, Indiana. He heard my daughter Lexi on a podcast out of South Carolina. And he said, civility, this is what we need. He had just come out of a very divisive election campaign. And he researched her, called her up, found out she's from the same state she is, Indiana, and had her come to Carmel. They did a few things in the newspaper, and the local library sponsored it. And Ned and I were there. There were over 320 people from the community that came to the Carmel Library to talk about civility, because how many of you would agree that things are pretty divided right now in our world? And we just pray for healing in our families, healing in our nation. And what I appreciate about Lexi is that, that God's going to use her as a bridge builder in our community as a next generation. And she's smart, she's wise. In fact, a clipboard's going around, and if any of you would like to, well, it's like a guest book today, so she can know who is here. But also, her Substack is fascinating. It's a newsletter, and it's like a full lesson that I get in history and philosophy and Greek mythology and every month, so every few weeks. So you might enjoy her Substack. Also, if any of you have children or grandchildren in the public schools, my vision is that we would give, I'm going to meet with the mayor of Surrey and each city, and that we could give this book to every child in Surrey, every child in Bellingham as a gift from the mayor, RCMP, city council, and school board. And it's a simple little gift teaching citizenship and good manners. The book stars the mayor and the police chief. So they get to be the stars of the book. So they'll be passed around. You're welcome to look at it. Take these home for your grandkids. I think Lexi's book is $39 on Amazon Canada, but the publisher gave us a good price, so we can give them away for $30. Here, if you want to take one, or my set is $30 as well. And Brenda Jones, thank you, and you and Reg. She's a famous writer locally, and as well as Ed Hurd. I'd like to honor both of these writers. She's offered to help with the books afterwards if you would like it autographed for you or your grandchildren. But I have a DJ here named Chloe, my niece, and she's going to press gratitude. And I'd love you to think about this song, that we would have an attitude of gratitude. Have enough to eat and a place to sleep. Healthy mind and 2 strong feet. Do you see life is really sweet? A thankful heart just can't beat. If you want a good attitude, if you want a good attitude, goodness gracious gratitude. The crack, don't complain. Every whiner is a pain. Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, God, for all I have. If you want a good attitude, if you want a good attitude, show a little gratitude. Goodness gracious gratitude. Turn to the people beside you and give them a high five. Say, glad you're here. Glad you're here. Thankful. Linda, ready to sing it with me? If you want a good attitude, if you want a good attitude, show a little gratitude. Goodness gracious gratitude. Goodness gracious gratitude. Goodness gracious. One last time, go. Goodness gracious gratitude. Put your hands in your thankful for our freedom. So, this is what my little girl grew up doing, traveling with Judy the Manners Lady, and she performed with me 2 of the songs she sings on the CD. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for my beautiful daughter, Lexi Hudson. Thank you. Go get him, girl. She grew up, didn't she?
Thank you, Mom, and thank you so much to Edith and Tom for this gracious hospitality and opening up your home and inviting, and to each of you for joining us this afternoon, a little bit of your Sunday afternoon, to talk about this most important question of our day, which is how do we flourish across deep difference? There's no question that we live in a very divided moment. We feel that viscerally. We're reminded every day of how high the stakes are and how important these conversations are that we're having every day. And as I learned while writing this book, this actually isn't a new problem. But before I go there, I'll share with you a little bit about my story. I came to my interest in this topic honestly, as you just said. My mother, as you know, called Judy the Manners Lady. Yet, as you might not know, while writing this book, I discovered that my mother is actually one of 4 women who were internationally renowned experts on manners and etiquette, named Judy. There are 4 of them. So Edith was correct when she said she's a manners lady. That's true. She's like one of the four Judiths. The most famous is called Judith Martin. She's like 40 years. She's been a Washington Post columnist on etiquette, and there are 2 others. Incidentally, all of them have ties to Boston as well. My mother and father lived in Boston, where we lived for several years when I was younger. And so anyway, my mother is my favorite of these Judiths in the etiquette industry. my personal fave of the Judys in the etiquette biz. And she, embodied true civility as I define it and explore it throughout my book. She and my grandmother before her, and all of my 4 aunts, Sky and Janice, thank you for being here today, and also Carolyn is not here. They all embody just the spirit of true civility, which is, welcoming the outsider and transforming stranger into friend. And growing up, my home was a revolving door of newcomers to our community. Homestays, just immigrants to our community. It was just, my parents were always eager to open up what we had and share what we had. It wasn't about what we had, it was just how they used what we had. And my mother, in addition to modeling and embodying true civility, she also instructed us in the ways and means of politeness. So I remember I'm constitutionally allergic to authority. I hate rules. I hate being told what to do. And I remember growing up, my mother would teach me how to, shake hands just so, look people in the eye, or set the table just so. And I remember my instinctual response was, why? Why do we do things the way that we do them? I always hungered for kind of a moral, philosophical underpinning for our social norms and social expectations. Is it just because some self-appointed expert, some Judith of another era, some other manners lady said that we should at some point in time? Or what was the rationale for it? I mean, some cultures eat with their hands, others eat with chopsticks, and we eat with forks and knives, and some cultures bow when they greet. Like, what is it about the way that we do them, and what's the story behind it, the why behind it? So I always kind of had these questions lingering in the back of my mind, but I generally followed the rules and expectations that my mother instructed my brothers and I in, because she promised they would lead to success in work and school and life, and she was right. Until I found myself in federal government. I served in the Prime Minister's office here in Canada in 2013 as an intern, as part of the Trinity Western Laurentian Leadership Center, but I was also in federal government in the United States, in Washington, D.C., 2017 to 2018, a very divided time in America, but also in our world more broadly. And my experience in government was kind of a microcosm of the divisions in our world more broadly right now. I saw, when I was in government, these two extremes. On one hand, there were people who were overtly kind of bullies. They were hostile, they were aggressive, they were bellicose. I knew to stay away from these people. They were the ones with sharp elbows, and they were willing to step on anyone, steamroll anyone to get ahead and get what they wanted. On the other hand, there was a contingent of people that at first I thought they were my people. They were polished and poised and polite. But these are the people who would smile and flatter me and others one moment and stab us in the back the next. And this second contingent really perplexed me, because one thing my mother had said growing up was that manners mattered because they were an outward expression of our inward character. And yet here I was surrounded by a contingent of people who were perfectly well-mannered and yet ruthless and cruel. These were people who used etiquette and politeness in order to undermine people, disarm them and undermine them. This experience clarified several things for me, and this environment of government, the divisions I experienced firsthand, that was the immediate impetus for me leaving government and writing this book on again, this question of how do we flourish across difference. But this experience clarified several things for me. One, at first, these two modes, the extreme hostility and the extreme politeness, they seem like polar opposites, extremes, but they're actually very similar. Both modes have an insufficiently high view of the gift of being human. They instead see other people purely in terms of means to their selfish ends. The hostile contingent sees others as pawns to be bullied and steamrolled in order to get whatever they want. And the polite contingent sees others as pawns to be manipulated and discarded the moment that they no longer serve their purposes. I remember one time when I was in government, a colleague came up to me one day and told me how radiant I looked and I was brilliant, and could I please, I was the only one in fact that could help him with this project, could I please just help him? I was happy to lend a hand. I didn't realize that in agreeing to help him, he expected me to do the entire project for him, but I was happy to help. I did the work, gave it to him, and he ended up passing off my work as his own and took all the credit, took the meetings associated, all the glory that he was not prepared for because he didn't do the work. And then, this is crucial, the moment he got what he wanted from me, gone were the pleasantries, gone were the compliments and the flattery. I had served his purposes. He had seen me purely in terms of what he could get from me, and then the moment I was no longer useful to him, he discarded me and cast me aside. And that made me feel really used. I was instrumentalized. And that's what I realized about that both these extremes use people. As Martin Buber, the German philosopher who was cited by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in his wonderful book, essay, A Letter from Birmingham Jail, Martin Buber says, when we instrumentalize others, we treat thous as its. We treat them as objects, when we should treat them as our fellow human beings with dignity and equal moral worth. And so when I left government, I realized that what we suffer from today is this dearth of appreciation again of the gift of being human. I left government and I thought deeply, what about this question? What does it mean to be human? And what is the bare minimum of respect that we are owed and owe to others by virtue of our shared humanity and common dignity? And what does that look like in practice, even when we deeply disagree? And even amid a world where these two extremes are all too common, the extreme hostility and bellicosity, and the extreme tone policing, and faux politeness and niceness that is actually not really respecting others. This experience clarified for me as well that there is an essential distinction between civility and politeness. I realized that politeness is manners, it's etiquette, it's external, it's superficial, it's technique. Whereas civility is something deeper and far more important. It is internal. It's a disposition of the heart. It's a way of seeing others as our moral equals who are worthy of a bare minimum of respect just by virtue of our shared moral status as members of the human community. And that crucially, sometimes actually loving someone, actually respecting them, requires being impolite. It requires breaking the rules of etiquette in order to tell a hard truth, have an uncomfortable conversation, engage in a robust debate. That we may feel the temptation to just polish over paper difference as politeness suggests, but in fact, the way to actually respect others, to love them, is to tell those hard truths, to have those uncomfortable, difficult conversations. I love etymology, the story of our language, and stories of words we use every day are throughout my book. And the story of these words, civility and politeness, also illuminates this distinction that I make. Has anyone here heard of Samuel Johnson before, by any chance? Yes, raise your hand if you have. Okay, Samuel Johnson. Who was he? Someone shout it out.
Dictionary.
That's right, Samuel Johnson. He was an English writer, essayist, a prolific kind of just literary luminary in the 18th century or 1700s in England, and he wrote the first English dictionary. He set about this unthinkable task of defining our language, defining the world as it was currently spoken at the time. So he wrote this amazing, it's this incredible scholarly feat. But if you go to his English dictionary right now, you can find it online, you will see that he defines civility in terms of politeness and politeness in terms of civility. And if you go to Webster's Dictionary, dictionary.com right now, you'll see the exact same thing. There's an entry on civility that uses the word politeness and politeness in terms of civility. So Johnson, he conflated these words, and we've been doing it ever since. And yet, the etymology of these words, the original Latin roots, supports this distinction that I argue for. The Latin root of politeness is polliere, which means to smooth or to polish in Latin. And that's what politeness does. It's external, it's superficial, it papers over difference, sweeps difference under the rug, as opposed to giving us the tools to grapple with difference head on. The etymology of civility is civitas, which is the etymological root of our words city, citizen, citizenship, and civilization. And that's what civility is. It's the conduct, the mores, the habits, the character of a citizen in the city, which especially in a democracy like our own, requires debate, requires honest truth-telling, requires hashing out our differences and not just sweeping them under the rug and pretending that they don't exist. So I argue throughout my book that we need less politeness, less pretending to be respectful of the innate dignity and personhood of others, and more civility, more of the disposition and orientation and actual love and respect for others. That loves them enough, respects them enough to even risk offending them, telling hard truths, and engaging in robust debate. Some of the important conversations of our day that urgently need attention and need to be had. As I mentioned while I was writing this book about a problem that I knew mattered to me and mattered to our moment, what I realized while writing it, and I surveyed the human experience, and I zoomed out and wanted this book to represent humanity and the human historical record. And I realized that this is not a new problem. This is in fact the defining question of democracy, of the classical liberal project from which democracy emerges. How do we peacefully coexist, even when we differ? But it goes even further back than that. This is actually the defining question of the human species. As long as we've been around, we've been trying to do this thing called life together. And it's always been hard. It has never been a foregone conclusion. We are profoundly social as a species. We become fully human in relationship with others. We achieve our potential personally and communally in relationship with others. We're more likely to survive, but also to flourish with others. And yet, morally and biologically, we are driven to meet our own needs before others. So we're deeply social and also defined by self-love. And this love of others and love of self is a part of the human condition. And it has always been with us, and it has always been a threat and in tension with one another, and been a threat to this joint project of living well with others that is human society. So this is a timeless human problem and remarkably, as I learned while surveying this question and etiquette manuals and civility and ethical manuals from across history and across culture, the solution is also remarkably timeless. And the solution is civility. Civility is the art of human flourishing. It is the process by which we surrender our self-love, subjugate our ego and immediate wants and desires for the sake of living well and living in relationship with others. And across history and culture, people have come to this conception, this idea of civility independently of one another. For example, did you know that the oldest book in the world is a civility book? It was given to us from ancient Egypt, 2350 BC, so over 4,000 years ago, the oldest book in the world. It was written by a guy named Ptahhotep. Ptahhotep was an Egyptian vizier, so an advisor to the ancient pharaoh. You know, and he was someone who had reached the inner ring. He was at the pinnacle of earthly and temporal success, and he was actually even offered the opportunity to become pharaoh. And he turned that down and opted instead to lead a quiet life in retirement. And so he exited public life, resigned from public power. And while he was in retirement, he thought deeply about the timeless principles of human flourishing. And he set pen to paper, hoping to distill and immortalize these timeless principles of living well and give them as a gift to Pharaoh's son, in hopes that they would make him a wise and just ruler. But his maxims, his teachings that are known to history now as the teachings of Ptahhotep were actually widely consumed in ancient Egypt and probably even made it to other parts of the world. For example, so many parts of the ancient world revered the sophistication and refinement of ancient Egyptian culture. For example, the ancient Greeks were constantly roaming and coming in and out of Egypt, so it's possible that this reached other parts of the world as well. But this is the oldest extant book that we have today, and the teachings are remarkably timeless. In fact, they could appear in a Miss Manners Judith Martin column in the Washington Post today. For example, Ptahhotep says, "Do not abuse a power differential. Don't exploit a difference in power. Be good and just and kind to the vulnerable in society. Taatep says, do not be good to your friends and family and neighbors just when you need something. Be good to them and gracious and generous as long as you live, and do it all the time, just because they're people. Taatep says in 4 or 5 different maxims, do not gossip. Gossip is just as toxic, as lethal to human community today as it was 4,000 years ago. In fact, in the Hebrew Bible, the word for gossip is etymologically linked to the word for leprosy, because just as what gossip does to a human community, corrodes it, as leprosy does to the body, literally eats away and destroys it. So don't gossip, don't slander, don't malign someone's reputation behind their back, Taatep says. And these and other of his 37 maxims are just as timely today as they were when they were written 4,000 years ago. Human nature doesn't change. This is a timeless problem, but also a timeless solution. And sometimes people pass down this kind of core of human wisdom across generations and across place. But other times, people just independently observed the human condition and said, what works when it comes to this thing called living well with others? And what detracts from this project of living well? And let's do more of what works and try to avoid what doesn't and see how that works for us. And so I see my book as a distillation of kind of the greatest hits of this genre, this common core of human wisdom across history and culture. This is a timeless problem. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's build on the wisdom of those that have come before us and deploy their wisdom as we grapple with this essential question of our day now. It can feel really, we can feel really helpless when we look out at the world around us and not really know what we can do. You know, every day there's a new headline, a new scandal. We can't control who's in Langevin building in Ottawa or who is in the White House in DC, and we can't control who's tweeting what and who's saying what. And it feels like there's just so much outside of our control when it comes to how to resolve this timeless, intractable problem. But I actually learned firsthand that we have way more power to be a part of the solution than we realize. I call myself a refugee from federal government. I fled, I came home from work one day when we were in DC, and I said to my husband, I am done with politics, I am done with DC, let's move to Indiana, I said, which is where he's from originally. And we talked about one day moving there to be closer to his family and to raise a family of our own. And my husband smiled and said to me, okay, sounds good. We'll move to Indiana, no take-backs. And a few months later, we were there. We've been there 6 years now. 6 years in April. And when we first moved to Indiana, it didn't quite feel like home. We've all probably had that experience where we move to a new place, a new school, a new community, a new job even, and it takes work to cultivate community. It doesn't happen organically and naturally. It takes effort, it takes concerted effort. And one day at church, a woman came up to us and she said, hi, I'm Joanna Taft. Would you like to porch with us sometime? And I'd never heard the word porch used as a verb before. But I was curious and we didn't know any people in town, and so we were glad for the invitation. We went to her house that afternoon. And on her great big front veranda, on her turn of the century historic home in Indianapolis, that day I realized that Joanna is staging a quiet revolution against our atomized and divided status quo. And I realized that actually we can too. On the porch that day, Joanna had curated people across race, across politics, across class, across geography even. I mean, there's much that is the same about this problem as we've explored so far. There's also a lot that is different. There's some challenges that are in fact unique to our moment. For example, social media, that wasn't around 100 years ago or 15 years ago even. and the way in which one person's mistruth or hate or vitriol can now affect millions in instant. You know, Winston Churchill said 70 years ago that a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to put its pants on. And that's even more true now in the era of social media. So that's something that's different. Another thing that's different is, you know, the profit motives of our media that we reward. They are rewarded by reporting on the fear-filled, the incendiary, getting the hate clicks, and that gets eyeballs. That's something that's new. That was not around in the days of Tahoe Tech or even 20 years ago. Another thing that's different is that it's incredibly easy to go about our lives and not really encounter people that we don't want to encounter. If we leave our homes at all, we can go from our homes to our cars to our offices and back again. We can get Netflix delivered, like Netflix is in our home. We can get our groceries delivered. Like everything is at our fingertips, and we can perfectly curate our existences corporeally, physically, but also virtually, to not really encounter people that we differ from or just don't care to be around. And that's different than in past eras. And that is precisely what is so revolutionary about what was happening on Joanna's porch that day, that she'd intentionally curated people across these differences, across these silos, and put them into proximity, physical proximity together. We learned during the pandemic that virtual interaction was a cheap substitute, an imperfect substitute for the beauty, the magic, the irreplaceable beauty of being in person together. Mm-hmm. And that's what was so beautiful about a shared space with people across these differences. Not to have a structured conversation across difference, like you say your bit, tell us your view on this, and no, just to be humans in a shared setting, to be reminded of our common humanity, our common identity as citizens, and to be seen and known and loved just by virtue of our shared dignity and irreducible moral worth as persons. And there are far too few moments and opportunities for that. In an era where it feels like on every front we're reminded of why we are different and why we should fear difference and fear the other. And instead, this was an incubator for seeds of trust, of friendship, things that are also direly missing in our world today at a macro level, where we are quick to assume the worst about people we don't know, or we know one thing about them and assume we know everything about them based on their view on one issue or one thing they've said or one thing they've done. That's deeply dehumanizing and essentializing of the other. That's another thing that was so beautiful about Joanna's porch, just to see others in the fullness of who they were, contextualizing and not allowing them to essentialize themselves by virtue of one aspect of who they were. And I had the privilege of traveling the country and meeting people like Joanna, who both with front porches and without are doing the same thing. I met people who hold office hours at a coffee shop. And you know, people know that that's just the time and place where they can come and be seen and known and loved and come in community and conversation. I met people who use their front stoop, their front lawns. They have supper clubs that you know, it's not about, the porch is just a metaphor, and it's not even about the porch, it's about how you use what you do have to create community wherever you go. And I realized even that looking back at my own childhood, the way I was raised by my family, like the way that we used our family dinner table as this revolving door of strangers, that we were doing the same thing. And looking back at even how my grandmother, she had her you know, wicker cast iron patio table on her front lawn, and she, you know, would befriend anyone who passed by and just invite them to sit and stay a while. And she made countless people through her lives, both on her patio, on her front lawn, but also in just the anonymous marketplaces of life. She made them feel seen and known and loved. And she, in fact, inspired, it was the core formative model for my mother and my aunts who are here, who then in turn modeled that for us as well. My cousins are here, Chloe and Virginia, and I'm sorry if I'm missing any other cousins who are here, to do that as well. And I call this idea the mellifluous echo of the magnanimous soul. We are very familiar, it dominates our headlines, of these stories of generational trauma, of vicious cycles, of one person's selfishness to hurt people across time and across place. But we insufficiently appreciate that the inverse is true, the power of one individual, one magnanimous soul, with how they live their lives to create a mellifluous echo, to create the world, a brighter and more beautiful world by brightening the lives of every person that they meet. Instead of a vicious cycle, putting into play a virtuous cycle, which is exactly what my grandmother did, how my mother and her sisters live their lives, and how I aspire to live my life as well for my children to see, and to brighten my community as well. And what Joanna, my mother, my grandmother all have in common is the reality that they realize that there are big and serious problems in the world, but they can't control others. They can't control what's happening day to day in Washington and Ottawa and other parts of the world. All they can control is themselves. And they are choosing to reclaim their civic sphere and make the world a better and brighter place from right where they are. And we can too. We have far more power than we realize to either be a part of the problem and lead our lives in ways that sow viciousness, that sow mistrust, that sow discord in how we interact virtually and even in person, or to have our lives be part of the solution too. And it's not just in the big ways, how we interact when we're tested, when we're confronted with someone who has an idea that we deeply think is deeply immoral, deeply wrong. It's in the small ways too. How do we elevate life's everyday junctures? How do we become artisans of the common good? How do we affirm the dignity and humanity of our taxi cab driver, our clerk at the grocery store? How do we not miss an opportunity, but take advantage, maximize every opportunity to make people, those that are around us, feel seen and known and loved? And that's the stuff that supports our democracy and our flourishing as a society, that how we interact every day has very big consequences to the survival, flourishing of our species and our freedom as well. We have way more power to be a part of the solution than we realize. And I believe deeply that the more of us who choose to reclaim the soul of civility, that maybe, just maybe, we might be able to change the world. So thank you so much to Edith and to Tom for hosting the West Coast launch of the book. This will be my 30th city that I've been in 4 months since the book has come out. 30 cities, 100 events, and still many more to go. And really grateful for you opening up your home and welcoming us here. And thank you again to each of you for being here. And I'd love to sign a copy of the book for you, as I hope you will take one home. And just a real privilege to be here and share these ideas with you. Thank you for having me.
Don't go too far, Lexi, because some people have asked if we could have a Q&A after, and so if you have any questions for Lexi, just speak up loud, ask her questions. Married, 2 kids, and one on the way. So go ahead, and any questions you want to ask, just Roxy or Nina.
Have you met my parents?
This is my husband, Ned, Lexi's dad, if you haven't met my husband. So, if you have any questions, feel free to ask his.
Here's an easy one.
Dan.
Sometimes you get family members that want nothing to do with you. And you love your family, you want to engage, and they want nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a great question. I read about this in the final chapter of my book on which I call misplaced meaning and forgiveness. And it's about how, as a society, many of us have made a religion, made an idol out of politics, that as these traditional touchstones of meaning, faith, family, community, these are traditional ways in which people have derived their ultimate source of meaning and identity. Unfortunately, for many reasons, these have been on the decline in recent decades. And as that decline has happened, more and more people are finding their ultimate identity, ultimate source of meaning in politics, in public issues. And the problem with that is that when they encounter someone who differs from them on one issue, it's not just seen as two rational people having a disagreement. It's seen as, oh, that's an existential threat to who I am. Everything, like, and I can't, like, you know, lizard brain is activated. They're put into fight or flight. Like, they're not rational or reasonable when they feel like their very identity is at stake. That is bad for our souls and bad for democracy. That requires rational minds coming together and having and hashing out differences. And so I argue that as we have misplaced our meaning in politics, like, we are actually undermining our democracy. We're overdoing democracy and undermining it. There are three symptoms I see of this misplaced meaning, of this idolatry of politics. One of them is as the experience that you just shared, long-term friendships, family relationships ending over a political issue. You know, your view on Trump, your view on the COVID vaccine, you know, like, that's enough for me to never speak to you again. You know, like, you're a bad person that I can't be around. That is a symptom of disordered loves, of allowing you know, political issues to to become more important than the most important thing, which should be family. Family and friendships are way more beautiful, way more important than these quotidian, transient public debates. And so that's one symptom, that people are allowing those to become the most important thing to them and cutting people off, ending long-term friendships, cutting family members off because of that. Another symptom I see is that politics is everywhere. Previously, apolitical environments now have a political dimension, a political valence to them. It's like where you send your kids to school, what newspaper you read, where you get your news, what sports teams you root for. Like, you know, in sports in general, that politics has invaded all of these aspects of our lives, and we just don't get a break. The culture wars are everywhere. Our lives are oversaturated with division and the political issues that are so divisive right now.
Very true.
And again, that's bad for democracy, bad for our souls. If we're overdoing democracy by only talking about the hard issues day in, day out, we are undermining democracy, ironically. And again, hurting ourselves too. Another symptom I see of this misplaced meaning is an utter lack of curiosity, just like a total moral certainty about the world and others, and just an utter unwillingness to see things from different point of view. And so I argue that, you know, it's not enough just to say we have an unhealthy attachment to politics. We can't just say, okay, end love of politics. Like, we actually have to displace a harmful love with a brighter and better vision of the good. And I talk about intellectual curiosity, like curiosity breeds curiosity. So like asking questions, you know, you're confronted with an idea that you despise, and you say, oh my gosh, you're crazy, how can you think that? But instead, realizing that people are infinitely complex, and everyone comes to their views of the world for many reasons, and to be curious about those reasons. Tell me the story, tell me your story, and tell me how and why you've come to view the world that way. Instead of going in, you know, arms ablazing and saying, I know everything about you because of your one view, like being curious about the story that brought them to that view. Instead of curiosity, I talk about friendship, like having friendship, especially cultivating friendship across difference, where you don't talk about the difference. I think it's perfectly okay at family dinner tables, for example, to not talk about politics, that there are more important things than political issues, and to in fact just celebrate the love and the bonds and the familial context that is those venues, that not all places are appropriate or necessary to talk about the divided things. So I talk about, you know, curiosity, I talk about friendship, especially across difference, and I talk about beauty and the sublime. You know, walking on the beach on a day like today, and the ferocious whitecaps crashing on the shore, or staring up at space at night. There's this, guess how many people have gone to space? Just take a wild guess. In the history of mankind, how many people have gone to space?
80.
80, okay. 200. 200. 30. It's actually about 600. It's a little bit more than you guessed. In the history of space travel, it's been about 600. And of these 600 people who have gone to space, they all report on this experience of being above our atmosphere and looking down at the world and being overwhelmed with a sense of terror and awe and wonder and sadness and joy all at once.
Wow.
William Shatner from Star Trek, he went to space, and he has this lovely essay you should all read that describes this concept that scientists have called, it's called the overview effect. And it's this experience that people have of being in space and looking down at the world and Earth and seeing the fragility and the vibrance and life of the vibrant blue and the vibrant greens in this vicious vacuousness of an infinite space that is so non-conducive to life of any kind. And seeing there are no borders, there is no language barrier, there are no political differences, and just being filled with a sense of humility and awe and wonder at the beauty of humanity and the preciousness of life, and that changes you. And that overview effect is encountering the sublime. The sublime, so something beautiful is something that makes you feel nice. The sublime is something deeper and richer. The sublime actually makes you feel terror, a sense of awe and wonder, and you feel a sense of smallness. And this overview effect is well documented, and the interesting thing is that we don't have to go to space to encounter that in the everyday. It can just be a nature walk. It can be our Friday walks on the water, that just getting outside of ourselves and just contemplating nature, contemplating beauty. That is what Iris Murdoch called a form of unselfing. She said that we have to daily find practices that conquer our fat, relentless ego that comes and cause strife and mischief in our lives day in and day out. And this ever-present threat, this thing called life together with others and flourishing with others, even when we deeply disagree. So encountering the sublime, encountering the beautiful in a way that displaces our sense of self, it shrinks our sense of self, and gives us a greater awareness of others and the smallness and pettiness of our daily, day-to-day quotidian concerns. That there's a whole body of research that scientists have been documenting on transcendence and on awe, how good that is for you, so healthy, and again, it shifts our perspective outside of the day-to-day. So those are three things that I talk about as antidotes to this crisis of misplaced meaning, this idolatry of politics that is bad for our society, bad for ourselves, but in fact these habits can heal society and in healing ourselves help heal society, as the subtitle of my book suggests.
Thank you.
Ed, what question do you have?
Yeah, Charles Dickens in 1841 wrote an amazing book about the United States. He also quickly alluded to Canada, almost as a footnote. He said Americans were wonderful people, but then he critiqued them, which they weren't used to. He said they suffer from universal suspicion. And a lot of this is fed by the viciousness of the media. This is 1841, making it so terrible that decent civil people don't want to enter politics. Any comments on Charles Dickens?
That's a great critique. There's so many great things about that anecdote. I mean, one, the difficulty of Americans taking criticism, I think that's from an outsider especially. It's funny, after Dickens wrote his Notes on America, the book that you're alluding to, his book stopped selling in America. It was a bad business move. Like, everyone loved Dickens, and they were like, "What, this jerk? Who's this outsider coming in?" And yeah, he was not always flattering of America. For example, elsewhere he also says he hates the informality of North American culture. He loved rank. He talked about being on a train one day and the insufficient formality with which the clerk who was offering concession treated him, and he was very chuffed about England. Like, he loved the strict hierarchy there, many other funny criticisms. Also the idea that politics was hard to get into then, it's hard to get into now. You have to be insane to get into politics right now.
Right.
Like, I see, no upside, like why would you put your family through that? But like, it's the incentives are so bad because, it makes good people not want to vacate public space, and that's of course bad for public life, but that's the reality, that's the reality of the culture that we live in right now. And so, no other comments other than to say that this is a timeless problem. That the human condition is a human condition. That people that want to say that we're living in the most uncivil moment, need to study history more. It's why I'm a student of the past. It's why history is all throughout my book. That this has been a problem that we've been grappling with for a very long time.
Yeah, Lexi, he said the American election cycle, particularly in the Congress, never gets people a break. This is 1841. So there's never an escape from American politics. Any comment?
Well, that's an interesting observation that there's no escape, and he's writing, 1840s. He said that's the exact feeling that we have today. That doesn't matter where you look, where you turn, you go on your phone, the headlines, it's everywhere. And when we don't get a break, that is bad for our souls and for our democracy. That we have to recover areas of our lives that are desaturated with politics. We have to, for the sake of our souls and for the sake of democracy.
And our children.
Our children. Exactly. Thank you so much. Oh, one more question. Okay.
Sorry.
No.
Not to throw it in there. But on the topic of politics, I've heard it argued before that there are certain topics that people can disagree on that don't deserve respect because have different opinions. That's not necessarily what I think, but how would you argue with people who would say, okay, if you disagree with this particular type of issue, particularly maybe human rights or social issues which tend to be held much closer to the heart
Yes.
than others, how would you argue with someone who says respect when it comes to differences in those issues isn't deserved?
Yeah, it's a great question because a lot of people, I am pro pluralism. This is the defining question of a democracy, of the classical liberal project. That we need to be able to peacefully coexist, even amidst different visions of the good. And there are a lot of people in this space that say all ideas deserve equal respect. And I'm not actually saying that. I'm actually saying that all people deserve respect. That every single human being, regardless of your view, that they deserve. Their ideas might be crazy, but they deserve respect. And what does that respect look like in practice? And how you can embody that in your everyday is exactly what my book explores. It's a handbook for how you, in your everyday, can be a part of healing these deep divisions. Okay, last question, Joel.
So how do we engage in a decent, civil kind of discussion about certain very divisive social issues, like what's happened basically since now the overturning of Roe v. Wade down there in the United States of America, as one of my associates once called them.
So what's your question?
I'm just wondering, how do you engage in a decent kind of civil discussion,
Yeah.
say supercharged issues, like for example?
Yeah, my answer would be don't talk about it. that it happens far too often that we talk about it, that we're obsessed with it, and many other issues that we need to are urgently, there's a lot at stake, I think, to desaturate our lives from it. We have to talk about the weather, talk about kids, there are a million other more beautiful, life-giving things to talk about. I think that the divisive things are what we often lead with, and that's not the most important aspect of who we are. Often, I think we need far more opportunities to remind ourselves that we have much more in common as citizens of Canada, as human beings, and not just focus on the controversial divisive things. And I think it's only when we have a sufficient appreciation of our shared humanity, our shared, that we overwhelmingly have more in common, that which differentiates us. Only when we have that front and center can we reasonably rationally talk about these conversations, and we're not there right now. So let's get there first. We're, as a culture, kind of have this overhaul. My book is a overhaul of values. My book is a humanistic manifesto. It's a manifesto of the gift of being human in a time that is deeply dehumanizing and deeply barbaric. And we are dehumanizing of others when the stakes feel high. My book came out 3 days after Hamas invaded Israel. And nobody wanted to talk about civility because everyone was like, take the gloves off, burn it to the ground. We need to be willing to do anything in order to beat the other side. And I realized that that's exactly when you need a book like mine most. You know, what do you owe the other by virtue of our shared humanity, even when we want to just burn it all down and take the gloves off? So in times of war, in times of divisive elections, that's when we're most likely to dehumanize, to degrade the humanity and dignity of the other. And that is precisely when we need to keep the respect that we owe the other by virtue of our shared humanity in mind most. So thanks for that question, and thank you all for being here. I'd love to sign a book for you.
So friends, thank you, Lexi. I'm super proud of you. And David whispered to me, you should be so proud of your daughter. So thank you, David. And let me ask you a question. How many of you think this would be a good idea to do on a larger scale in Surrey and have a town hall on civility? And we could bring more friends and have it somewhere. And just so this is what happened in Indiana, that a city councilor had the vision to do it, and people came. People want to talk, and give them a chance to talk. Have Q&A, lots of Q&A. And now, March 9th, I believe, they're having a follow-up meeting from their January event. So it's not a one-off. This is a long time what we need for healing, and we think about the different areas of your life. How many of you are sports parents? Water polo back there. Hockey, I'm a soccer mom. She played for UVic. Hockey, sports, athletics, civility and sports. Our business, Chamber of Commerce. So we'll be speaking at the Chamber of Commerce. So we're going to meet with the mayor. Actually, Roxy's going to give a set of these books to the mayor of Surrey. Maybe we could do a citywide town hall. And what's good of this, some of you have red name tags, some of you have blue, right? This is not we're very inclusive. We want to get beyond labels and just bring healing. So anyway, if you would like to get Lexi's newsletter or just sign the guest book, this is here. We'll pass that around. Thank you, Brenda. Where's Brenda? Oh,
I leave Tuesday.
you know why she's leaving Tuesday? Because Jordan Peterson invited her backstage in Indiana on Wednesday. So I'm super jealous. She had lunch with Lord Conrad Black, which is super cool. And so it's really unique, the doors that God has opened for her. If you have any other place that she's going to be back in the summer that you'd like her to speak at your event, I'll be also doing kindness concerts in the schools across the Lower Mainland. As you know, most of the schools were shut down for a couple of years, so it's time to open them up again. Lexi's book, the publisher's made available for $30 rather than $39 on Amazon, which is cool. And a set of my books is $30 as well. If you want to take it, you can do cash, check, or e-transfer. I wish we could just give them to you all. We just can't do that, but you can e-transfer or whatever just to my phone number, which is up here. And but thank you all. And would there be someone that would maybe just do a closing prayer for Lexi and these crazy days in our world that might be willing to do that? Ed, would you mind doing that?
Yeah, sure.
And we're from different religious backgrounds in this room, but you know what? God loves each of us, and we just pray for my daughter. Thanks.
Yeah, so, dear Father, we thank you for Lexi and her passion for civility, and we pray favor on this book and these networking in Jesus' name. Amen.
This is interesting. Some people, like one school, a parent bought 100 copies to give to the teachers at the school of Lexi's book. Some other people have bought it for just in bulk. So that's what we would love, to get this message of healing into people's hands. So anyway, thanks everyone. Thank you.